Welcome back to Court TV Live. We are in the middle of live gavel-to-gavel coverage of a death penalty case of a family massacre in Tallahassee, Florida. It is the retrial of the state of Florida versus Henry Segura. 41-year-old Segura is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the brutal deaths of 27-year-old Brandy Peters, their 3-year-old son Javante Segura, and her twin 6-year-old daughters Tamia and Tania Peters. Now, Peters and her 3 children were found dead in her house on November 20th, 2010. Court records show Brandy Peters was shot up to 8 times. In his opening statement this morning, the prosecutor explained what he believes the motive was.
Motive usually involves, as I said, money, love, relationship, jealousy, things along those lines. And what we find out is shortly there before this murder occurred, Henry Segura is behind on his child support payments of over $20,000. $20,000, a lot of money.
Segura first went to trial in 2017, but it ended in a hung jury. The jury was deadlocked with 8-4 in favor of, get this, doesn't happen a lot, to acquit Segura. That's right. Now, here's another big hurdle in the state's case. Convicted gang leader James Carlos Santos claims he ordered the killings of Peters and her kids. Segura's defense attorney explained the connection in his opening statement.
James Carlos Santos is a drug trafficker, a member of the Vice Lords, who brought Brandy in at some point in the 2000s to work for him as a mule. He would work with the Los Zetas cartel in El Paso and in Brownsville, Texas, pick up loads of drugs, bring them to the southeastern United States, Atlanta in particular, for distribution. He recruited Brandy to work as a mule for him, and she did indeed start working for him. At some point, he became aware that she was lifting drugs off the deliveries. It was a significant amount, and he knew at that point it was on him to take care of it. Otherwise, he would be taken care of by the Zetas. And so he set out to take care of the problem. Mr. Santos will testify in this trial. Mr. Santos will admit to you that he ordered the murders, that he orchestrated the murders.
Preview, Segura is going to testify. Okay, so now a jury of 2 men and 4 women, a 6-member jury, which will decide which of the stories to believe. Henry Segura is facing the death penalty if he's convicted of first-degree murder. Okay, in the 4 o'clock hour today, it is All Women Wednesday. Let me bring in my guest, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, Marcia Mignon. Yes. Okay, I got it right. And criminal defense attorney Crystal Ramirez. Thank you guys for being here. Initial thoughts on this case. It is so convoluted, but it's quite fascinating. Crystal?
I agree. It's very fascinating because there are a lot of moving pieces. Like, who would have thought that, you know, the drug cartel would be, you know, involved in this case?
Usually
right?
It's always like a red herring, like, oh, the Mexican drug cartel did it. But in this case, they really may have done it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a viable defense.
It is a viable defense. And then what the defense has for them is the prior trial and how, you know, the verdict, although it was a hung jury, it was in their favor. So,
yeah, right. You know, Marcia, it seems almost like we're having 2 separate trials. Like the defense is having a trial about the Mexican drug cartel, and the prosecution's having this trial about a father whose motive was back child support.
It's difficult to believe. The state's motive is extremely weak, and the reason is because people kill to gain money. People don't kill to save money. So the concept of, I'm going to kill my child so I can save $20,000, I mean, it kind of reads like an insurance commercial. You know what I mean? I saved a lot of money on my child support. What did I do? I killed my son.
And also, the defense gave us a bit of a highlight this morning and said that Segura has another baby's mother, and she's going to come in and testify that he owed exactly that same amount, $20,000 of back child support, to her, and nobody ended up dead with respect to that. And if you just, you know, people make pros and cons lists. If you have a list that just says 100,000 versus 20,000, where is more motive for murder?
It's on the 100,000. It is clear it's on the 100,000. If you've stiffed me and I'm in the cartel I have to send a chilling message. I have other people who might be running drugs for me, so I have to make sure that they also know, do not take any of these drugs off of what you're doing.
Now, the defense is planning to call a gang expert. They called one at the first trial. But, you know, a lot of experts come in, they're just there to educate the jury. Doesn't this jury need actual evidence that Brandy Peters was, in fact, a drug mule for the Los Zetos drug cartel?
I think that testimony and I think testimony would be enough. I don't think it, which is evidence, but
right.
But it still creates a reasonable doubt. And so even if there is no direct statement or let me pull back. I think that there is a need for testimony. There is a need to make the connection, because if not, it creates an issue.
Then you're just making things up.
Yes, but I think that what the benefit is the prior trial. And with the prior trial, you kind of have a roadmap of where you want to go. So.
Exactly. But okay, so Marcia, what if the testimony, what if the evidence you have is in the form of a very nice gentleman named Carlos Santos, who is doing federal time, who I believe has threatened to assassinate, isn't it the prosecutor in Georgia?
The Fulton County prosecutor.
Right,
yes.
Okay, so he's threatened to have former Florida Governor Charlie Crist and Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Paul Howard, who was your boss, and Santos threatened to kill these people. Is he the guy that you're going to rely on to explain this drug cartel?
That is even better for you. The fact that this guy has no limit in who he's willing to threaten helps the defense's case, because they can say, listen, this guy's not even afraid of the district attorney in Fulton County. So I would use it to say, if he's not afraid of the DA who can prosecute him, who has a slew of investigators, law enforcement behind him, he's not threatened by this young lady.
Because that would be the testimony to make the connection that Crystal was referring to.
Right.
Okay, All Women Wednesday will continue after this short break and Court's in a recess. But when they get back, we get back. Welcome back to Court TV Live. Court has just recessed. I believe the jury has left, and testimony will resume tomorrow morning. Let me just bring in my guest now, because we just had a huge moment before we took our last break. Still with me for this All Women Wednesday is Marcia Mignon and Crystal Ramirez. So just before, and I just want to set the scene up also for our viewers, that this morning the defense in their opening statement said they were challenging specifically the prosecution's entire timeline of the day of the murders. And the prosecution alleges that Brandy Peters and her 3 young children were murdered around, let's say, I think between 6:30 and 7 p.m. So the defense, and this was a large part of his opening, he said no, and he said specifically that it was more, it could have been even after 10 p.m. And part of what he relied on was that Brandy's sister, Monica, spoke to her at approximately 10 p.m. Well, Monica just testified, and Monica went methodically through her attempts at trying to reach her sister and said, no, I didn't talk to her. And then, of course, when she was, I think her recollection was refreshed. I couldn't really even hear, but it sounded like she looked at the police report, and what she had told the police was she spoke to her mom around 10 p.m. And her mom were trying to figure out, okay, you know, did you speak to Brandy? Did you speak to Brandy? So how devastating is this for the defense?
It's bad. And the reason it's bad is because as a defense counsel, when you promise something in your opening, you want to produce it in your case. You lose credibility bucks with a jury, and now you have a problem.
Crystal?
I agree, because, you know, as a defense attorney, you want to establish that credibility, as you stated, and once you lose it, you're fighting against, you know, preconceived notions that the jury may have had already. And when you don't present what you stated that you would establish, you kind of, lose that strong handle.
And hello, it's only been like 3 hours into the case and you're losing credibility. Okay, ladies, you're going to stick with me. Thank you so much. Our coverage of Florida versus Segura continues at the top of the hour. Do you think that is enough of a motive to kill? And that's the issue is, okay, I understand, men kill women and women kill men and all that, but to kill your babies, is it enough?
I don't think it's enough. There's no connection to the children. So if you are angry about child support, it still doesn't address why would you then go after the children? Why would you go after the twins? Why would you go after your own child? There's no connection. And that's what it makes it difficult.
You agree, right?
I agree.
This is just,
it's
not enough.
$20,000, first of all, it's arrears. It's not even future child support. And a lot of courts will deal with arrears on a smaller level. You can pay $100 a month until you get the arrears.
Make a payment plan, right? And I just want to point out, so Segura was arrested in Cleveland, Minnesota. This happened in Florida. So my point is, if you owed back child support and you didn't want to pay, you just leave. You run away, which he's done. So it's not as if he doesn't have an alternate plan in mind.
He can leave. He can leave the state. And to say that I can't travel out of the country, there's a lot of other states that I can go to. I don't need a passport to travel.
Yeah, well,
the United
I
States.
think traveling out of the country is the least of his problems right now. But I still think that, okay, you were a prosecutor, right, Marcia?
Correct.
All right, so prosecutors are ministers of justice. I was a prosecutor. I do believe that good prosecutors, if they don't have a case, they'll dismiss it. They won't prosecute it. These prosecutors, you have to think about this. They have stuck with this case since it occurred in 2010. So they waited 7 years to try it. So all of this was coming out, whether it was the drug cartel or other types of evidence or the lack of DNA at the time of the first trial. So many things kept pouring out that were favorable to the defense. At some point, they could have dismissed this.
Well, one of the issues you have is sometimes they double down. When you're at a place where you're thinking, oh my God, this could lead to thousands of dollars. This could lead to civil litigation regarding false imprisonment. You're thinking,
that's a good point.
I want the knees of the defense to buckle. I know it sounds a little bit on the unethical edge because a prosecutor is supposed to seek justice, but every now and then you get to that place where you're like, okay, it's too late, I gotta keep going.
Have you seen this, Crystal?
I've seen it, and I've even seen situations where you have that be a consideration in a plea deal, that there is no civil litigation suit that comes as a part of it.
And this gentleman, Henry Segura, has been in the county jail. I think he is the longest serving inmate in that county jail. I think he's hitting like 2,940 plus days. Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, this happened back in 2010. Okay, so the defense gave a very lengthy opening and laid out his case and all the witnesses that are going to testify, including his client. And he said this about the motive of $20,000.
Another child's mother that Mr. Segura had previously, Tamika Hawkins, who hates his guts but will testify on his behalf in this case, she had obtained a child support judgment of an almost identical amount some years before this happened, and it was still in place, which is to say he already couldn't travel internationally because Tamika Hawkins had a $20,000 judgment against him. He had already dealt with having himself put in jail and getting out by making a partial payment. He had already dealt with having his license suspended and getting it reinstated by making a partial payment. He had already figured out ways to work around having his taxes seized.
Okay, I just want to point out, because our control room graciously put it up, he's been in for more than 2,900 days. So you guys are right when you're talking about this whole idea of like a civil suit hanging over everyone's head. It's real. Okay. So now we have, I am sorry, the defense, their opening was so good, but for the whole Monica sister 10 p.m. phone call, they seem to have an answer for everything. And their answer to motive is that, okay, his ex, Tamika Hawkins, also had $20,000 in child support due to her. And, thank the Lord, nobody's dead. how does that chip away at the prosecution's motive?
I think it's very helpful for the defense because he's already, as his attorney said, he's already been held in contempt before. He's already spent time in jail before. He's already gone through the payment process. So this is something that he's already lived through, and he's just dealing with it. So it doesn't quite connect that this is, you know, what's going on in this particular case will present a motive to murder.
I also want to point out for you ladies as well as our viewers that our CourtTV team who's there in the courtroom is trying to find out if Mr. Segura has a criminal record. Because, Marcia, wouldn't that tell you something? You know, if this man has a criminal record and what type of criminal record, wouldn't that at least not even if the jury finds out, but just in analyzing this, then it would give us some indication that if he's even a violent person or someone who even disobeys the law.
Right, and that's critical, because if you can testify or you can present evidence that this man's never been arrested before for any violent crimes. In fact, the only thing he's ever had is child support issues. He's gone to custody. They were all civil contempt matters, and all civil contempt matters he dealt with. He got his license reinstated. He did all of that. So we don't understand why you believe that he would do this in this situation when he's already seen what the remedies are. Pay a little bit, get out, get everything back, get your license, get on with your life.
Now, before we get to look back at some of the opening statements, let's talk about the prosecution's obstacles and the defense obstacles. Okay, so the prosecution's obstacles are clearly that there's a drug lord out there, folks, and this drug lord is admitting to ordering the killing. This is Carlos Santos, and we do think he's going to testify. Also, the DNA at the scene may not be Segura's because DNA belonging to his son, Javante. They share DNA. So when the science is analyzed, according to the defense, that and this is what I think, just from my experience with DNA, is that some of the alleles that are attributed to Henry Segura are also going to be the same alleles to Javante. So the defense may win this. And then finally, 5 shoe prints. It was actually 5 shoe impressions were found at the scene. And defense submits that these are 5 different impressions, so 5 different people. That's a big deal. And law enforcement was excluded from that. Now, the defense obstacles are that Segura did in fact owe this $20,000 in back child support. So it's not, you know, it's not some kind of fiction where we still are waiting for the drug cartel. See, that's, you know, Crystal, when we were talking earlier, is that, you know, with the drug cartel, we need someone to actually put it into evidence that it's a real thing, whereas the $20,000 is a real thing. Segura's cell phone data puts him at the scene. Defense submits that that is because he was having sex with Brandy that day and he didn't want his wife to find out. And there was no forced entry to the house. That's another defense obstacle. So there you have it. It is opening day in Florida versus Segura, and our coverage will continue right after this. And guess what? I've got some news for you. James Carlos Santos, that inmate in federal prison who alleges that he ordered the killings of Brandy Peters and her 3 kids, he is going to testify, but he's going to claim the 5th Amendment. So that should be interesting. We're not sure when he's going to testify, but we did get word that he is going to testify. So as All Women Wednesday winds down, let me bring in Marcia and Crystal for some last thoughts. So we also heard that they're going to call a gang expert, which is a very novel type of expert. Tell me about the kind of expert that you'd want to bring in, Crystal, that would be able to educate this jury, but, you know, someone that's really going to make the jury believe in the defense's case.
Absolutely. You definitely want someone who's studied gang activity. You know, you have an option to use a doctor that's studied gang activity versus an actual ex-gang member. I think that the doctor would be preferable for me because it establishes credibility, but sometimes you may not have that option available. So the ex-gang member may be your best option.
I mean, I think there may be jurors that would find an actual ex-gang member more credible? Because, you know, some people, they go to jail, they turn their lives around. What do you think, Marcia?
I would find a retired drug cartel undercover federal agent.
Those are a lot of words in one person that you're looking for, Marcia.
That used to do this.
Yeah,
That's
Google
all
that.
they did was investigate for the feds.
Okay,
And they
okay.
were trying to shut down the running of drugs in the community. So
Understood.
they know how they respond. They know how these gangs treat people. They know what kind of killings they've seen regarding the running of it. So because they were former law enforcement, they're really credible for the jurors. Because the jurors are like, wow, this guy used to do that. He used to lock up the bad guys. He was responsible for, you know, getting these people in prison that were running these drugs. So I would go with an expert that was a federal former employee that doesn't do it anymore.
I think that's great. I think it's great. I think either way, you know, whatever type of expert will help move this case forward. Now, the other tidbit that we got from the defense's opening was that he referred to witnesses that would testify that were almost like the middlemen between Brandy Peters and the drug dealers. So you have Carlos Santos, who's coming from federal prison. People are obviously going to question his credibility, but I think that would really help the defense case to have someone who's actually been involved with the selling of drugs with Brandy.
I agree. And the defense's case is very, very specific, and it requires a ton of witnesses and a ton of evidence, to consider. But I think those witnesses will definitely help connect and link everyone together.
It's going to be good evidence, because it's going to be evidence that will corroborate why it's likely that the motive is $100,000 and not $20,000. Because now these individuals can talk about how many deals they've done, or you know, what kind of conversations they were having with her, or how did she participate. That's going to tell me what activities.
Hopefully, those witnesses could have even text messages with Brandy.
Correct.
You know, that would be great.
And they could potentially, lay out how much Brandy was getting paid outside of the $100,000. So that can also go to, the lifestyle that she was living, and maybe why she wanted to continue to live that lifestyle if she had allegedly had taken that money.
Well, I believe that the defense is alleging that Peters worked for the cartel between 2004 and 2007, and I think that helps their case at this point, because we had, I believe, her sister talking about, she didn't have a nice car or whatever. So I think the prosecution's basically saying she didn't have money, and the defense can say, yeah, it's fine, she didn't have money, because this incident happened in 2010 when she had already been owing the cartel money and she ran out of money. So that witness could actually now help both of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she spent it all. There's none left. She doesn't have a nice car anymore, because she's used up all the money that she's earned. And from 2007 to 2010, when she was killed, there's no money left. So she, of course, is borrowing mom's car and living in Section 8 housing, according to the testimony of her sister.
But listen, you guys know this from being criminal defense attorneys. In New York, when I was doing criminal defense, there was plenty really, really wealthy drug dealers who live in Section 8 type of housing or housing projects, because that's where your clientele could be. Again, not all clientele, because there's plenty of clientele in like the McMansions in different neighborhoods, but if a lot of people take advantage of that housing situation.
Yeah, it also draws attention away from you, where law enforcement is not targeting you because how do you afford this $1 million house? How do you afford these fancy cars? So you want to live, a low-key lifestyle, so that you're not drawing attention to yourself because you don't have a job.
I wonder if any evidence is going to come in on whether any money was found in Brandy Peters' home. Okay, all right, so that's what the three of us are going to look out for. Marcia Mignon, Crystal Ramirez, thank you both so much for spending your time with us. Up next, Vinnie Politan will be here with a preview of what's coming up tonight on Closing Arguments.